good to have you back at Mr. Horror Global. Tonight's story comes from a friend I'll call Daniel, a college kid in his first year away from home, who spent one long week unable to tell which of his closest friends was trying to save him and which one was setting him up to die. Viewer discretion advised. Friend or foe? Let me tell you about something that happened to a friend of mine. I'll call him Daniel. Back in 2005, his very first year of college. He was 20 years old, just barely an adult. And the scariest thing about it wasn't what he saw. The scariest thing was that for about a week he could not tell which of his friends was trying to save him and which one was setting him up to die. Daniel had grown up in one city, but for college he picked a university about an hour's drive from home. The tuition was cheaper there, and like most kids that age, he wanted out of his parents' house. He sold them on it as a maturity thing, get a little independence in before he had to serve his time in the military, and they let him go. He rented a tiny studio apartment near campus and started his life as an adult. His department did the usual thing before the semester started. They rounded up all the freshmen, drove everybody out to a retreat center, and put them through a one-night orientation. Drinking, talking, meeting upperclassmen, meeting professors. You know how that goes. You walk in not knowing anyone, you stand around a little awkward, and after a few hours and a few drinks, you've got the rough shape of who you're going to spend the next year with. By the time classes actually started in March, Daniel had a group. 4 of them, including him. There was a guy I'll call Eric, who had a bookish, straight arrow look, clean clothes, neat hair, the kind of kid your mother would like, and then 2 others, a guy I'll call Adam and a guy I'll call Ben. The 4 of them just clicked. They had most of the same classes, so they moved through the day as a unit. Between classes, they'd go to the billiards hall, the internet cafe, the comic shop. They cut class together. They drank together. By the end of that first semester, they were tight in the way you only get tight with people when you're 20 and everything is new. Then summer break came, and the group scattered. Eric was a local. He'd grown up in the town the university was in, lived there his whole life. Adam and Ben came from the same region as each other, but they hadn't known each other before college. Daniel was from an hour away, so the others packed up and went home. And Daniel stayed. He stayed because going home felt like going backward. Out at school, he was a grown man with his own apartment. Back at his parents' place, he'd be a kid again. So he told his mother he was going to stay and look for work, and he hung around his studio and ate a lot of cheap noodles and waited for friends to text. A couple of weeks into the break, Eric's mother called. Or rather, Eric called for her. Was Daniel still in town? Yes. Was he working? Not really. Was he interested in working? Maybe. She knew somebody, a friend of a friend, who needed somebody to help pack boxes 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 6, about $2 an hour. Not great money even then, but it was light work, it was steady, and it was an excuse to leave the apartment. Daniel said yes. The job itself was strange, but not in any way that made him suspicious. He showed up at a shabby little office on the ground floor of a strip mall, and inside there was nobody, just a desk, a stack of boxes, and a printed out list of what was supposed to go inside each one. He'd come in, work through the day taping and labeling and stacking, and leave. No one supervised him. No one asked how he was doing. He just packed boxes and collected his hourly wage and went home. About 2 weeks into that, Eric's mother showed up at the office. He'd never really met her before. She was friendly, motherly, asked about his summer. He said he didn't really have plans. She clucked her tongue and said that was a shame. A young man his age, with the military looming over him in another year or 2, he ought to be out doing something, going somewhere. She said she'd talk to Eric about it. The 4 of them ought to take a trip, a weekend somewhere. A valley, maybe. She said she'd handle it. Daniel thanked her and didn't think much of it. A few days later, Eric called. Friday. The four of them, pack for a night, meet at the front gate of the university at 10 in the morning. Eric was driving. Friday came. Daniel showed up at the gate. Adam was there. Ben was there. Then a luxury sedan pulled up. The kind of car a senior executive drives, way too nice for a 20-year-old. And Eric stepped out in sunglasses, grinning, and said, "Let's go." His mother had loaned him the car for the weekend. They drove to a grocery store and loaded the trunk with beer and bottles of liquor and pork belly and vegetables. They drove for about an hour and a half out of the city, up into the hills. Nobody asked where they were going. They had the windows down and the music up, and they were yelling out into the wind, and that was the whole point. Eventually, Eric turned off the main road onto a dirt track. The dirt track wound up the side of a mountain for about 5 minutes, and then on the left, a small stream appeared, running down through a narrow valley, and right at the edge of the stream there was a building. I say a building. It was barely that. It was a prefab cabin, one room basically, with a small kitchen tacked onto the side. The outside looked like it was about to fall over. Old, weathered, ugly. But there was a power line running into it, so it had electricity, and when Daniel asked if this was really the place, Eric said his mother had grown up in this area, and this little cabin was something the village had used for years. They hauled their groceries inside, and inside was a surprise. Inside was clean. There were screens on the windows so the bugs couldn't get in. There was a working refrigerator. There was an air conditioner. The four of them set up camp like kings. They loaded the fridge with beer. They stripped down to their underwear and splashed around in the stream all afternoon. They grilled pork belly as the sun went down. They drank. By 2 in the morning, everybody was wrecked. Adam had already passed out sitting up. Ben's eyes were half closed. Eric was rolling onto a sleeping mat. Daniel was tired and full, and he'd been in the water all day, so he lay down too, and he was asleep within a minute. What woke him was the sound. A loud metallic ringing. 2 different metallic ringings actually layered on top of each other. The deep, sustained boom of a big brass gong, and the sharper, faster clang of a smaller handheld gong. The two of them together, ringing and ringing without pause. Daniel doesn't wake up easily, but that sound brought him up out of sleep all at once. He sat up. Eric was still passed out on the mat next to him. The sound was coming from the kitchen. He got up and walked into the kitchen and turned on the light. Adam and Ben were sitting on the floor. Each of them had a brass instrument in their hands. Adam had the larger gong. Ben had the smaller one. There was a wooden crate near them that had been opened. Daniel hadn't noticed it before, but it had been sitting in the corner of the cabin the whole time. They were striking the gongs with mallets, slowly and rhythmically, like they were doing a job. Neither of them looked up when he came in. Neither of them turned. They were both staring straight ahead at nothing. Daniel said something. "Guys, knock it off. You're going to wake the whole valley." And they didn't respond. They kept striking the gongs at the same exact tempo. Mechanical. He walked closer. He knelt down in front of Ben and reached out to take the gong out of his hand, and he looked into Ben's face. Ben's eyes were open. Wide open. And there were no pupils. There were no irises. There was just the white of the eyes, top to bottom, like in a horror movie. Daniel let go and stepped back and made a small noise in his throat. He looked at Adam. Adam was the same. White eyes, no irises, no awareness, just 2 of his friends, sitting on a kitchen floor at 2 in the morning in a cabin in the woods, banging on ritual instruments and staring at nothing with eyes like boiled eggs. He couldn't bring himself to touch them. He started saying their names, louder and louder. They didn't respond. If anything, they started playing faster. He looked around the kitchen. There was a bowl on the counter that he'd used to rinse vegetables earlier in the evening, and it still had water in it. He grabbed it. He threw the water into both their faces. They stopped. At exactly the same moment, both of them stopped playing, and at exactly the same moment, both of their heads turned toward him. Two pairs of pure white eyes, locked onto him. No expression, no anger, no surprise, just attention. He scrambled back into the main room and shook Eric awake. Eric, get up, get up. Something's wrong with Adam and Ben. Something's wrong with them. Get up. Eric blinked up at him. What are you talking about? Just come look. They're not right. Eric stumbled into the kitchen behind him, and Daniel watched him stop in the doorway. Eric looked at the two of them on the floor. They had turned their heads back to where they'd been before, still holding the instruments, silent now, like statues. And Eric said, Hey guys, snap out of it. Nothing. Eric came back into the main room and sat down on the mat and put his head in his hands and was silent for a long time. Daniel said, I'm calling an ambulance. He pulled out his phone, and Eric stood up and grabbed his wrist and closed the phone before he could dial. Don't, Eric said. You think this is something an ambulance is going to fix? Look at them and tell me an ambulance is going to fix this. Daniel stared at him. What are we supposed to do then? Eric didn't answer. He pulled out his own phone, dialed a number, and waited. It was the middle of the night. He dialed again. Eventually somebody answered, and Eric said, Mom, I'm sorry. We're at the cabin. Adam and Ben are... Mom, something's happening. Can you come? Please. Just please. He listened. He nodded. He said okay, and hung up. What was that? Daniel said. My mother's on her way. Eric, your mother is an hour away. An ambulance is... Daniel, listen to me. I know how this sounds. This place, my mother grew up around here. This valley has a reputation. Locals don't come up here at night, but we're young. And I thought, what's the worst that happens? I didn't think. Look, an ambulance cannot fix what's happening in that kitchen. My mother can. Wait for my mother. So they waited. An hour. The two of them sat in the main room and they kept the kitchen door closed. And through the door they could hear absolutely nothing. No movement, no sound. If Adam and Ben had been normal, drunk, sleepy 20-year-olds, they would have shifted, they would have coughed, they would have done something. But there was nothing. After about an hour, they heard a car coming up the dirt road, tires on gravel, a door opening and closing. Eric's mother walked in. She had something in her hand that Daniel had never seen before, a kind of curved blade, almost like a small sword, and hanging off the handle were strips of white paper, cut into zigzag shapes like little lightning bolts. She looked at the two boys and she said, Get out, both of you, wait outside. They got out. They stood in the dark next to the stream and listened. Through the walls of the cabin, Daniel could hear her voice, chanting, sometimes shouting at other times, and a couple of times he heard a sound like something heavy being struck against the floor. It lasted about 5 minutes. Then she opened the door. Her forehead was streaming with sweat. Adam and Ben were lying on the kitchen floor, both of them on their sides, breathing slow and even, completely asleep. These These foolish boys, she said, half to herself. I thought they'd be all right. Young, healthy. What were you children playing at out here? Daniel said, we weren't playing at anything. We didn't touch anything. We were just sleeping. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she shook her head and said, go inside. Go to sleep. They won't wake up for a while. In the morning, pack up and go home. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sent you out here. And then she got back in her car and drove off into the dark. Daniel turned to Eric and said, Eric, what does your mother do for a living? Eric wouldn't look at him. Eric, she's just a housewife. Forget it. Don't do that. She just walked into a haunted cabin in the middle of the night with a ritual knife and fixed our friends in 5 minutes. Don't tell me she's a housewife. Eric sighed. She's a shaman, okay? She runs a small practice in town. She does readings. She does what she just did. I don't bring it up because it's embarrassing, so now you know. Drop it. Daniel dropped it. They went back inside and they closed the kitchen door and they laid down in the main room and somehow, eventually, he slept. When he woke up, the first thing he saw was 3 faces looking down at him. Eric, Adam, Ben, all 3 of them kneeling around his sleeping bag, watching him. He sat up fast. What are you doing? Adam said, Daniel, are you okay? Are you all right? What are you talking about? Ben said, move your arms for me. Can you move your arms? Anything hurt? Are you guys okay? The 3 of them exchanged a look, a careful, worried look. And then Adam said gently, Daniel, look at your feet. Daniel looked down at his feet. His feet were filthy, caked in dried mud. His calves were splattered with it too, all the way up to his thighs. His legs looked like he'd been running through the forest barefoot for hours. What is this? He said. Why are my legs like this? Daniel. Adam's voice was very kind. Sit up. Take a minute. Just breathe. What happened? Tell me what happened. And then all 3 of them, taking turns, told him a story. According to them, Daniel had woken up sometime around 2 in the morning. He had gotten up and gone into the kitchen alone. He had found 2 brass instruments in a crate they hadn't even noticed was in the cabin, and he had started banging on them. Then he had run out the door and into the woods. They had chased him. They had chased him for hours up and down the side of the mountain, while he laughed and ran and disappeared and reappeared between the trees. Eventually they had caught him and dragged him back to the cabin and put him to bed. They were exhausted. They had been waiting for him to wake up so they could see if he was all right. Daniel looked at them. He said, No. Daniel. No, I saw you 2. Adam, you and Ben. You were sitting on the kitchen floor with white eyes, banging the gongs. Eric, your mother came. She came in the middle of the night with that ritual blade thing, and she fixed you. I remember every minute of it. The 3 of them looked at each other again. Adam said, Daniel, my friend, none of that happened. Eric, tell them, your mother came, you called her. Eric looked at him for a long moment. He said, very quietly, Daniel, how do you know my mother is a shaman? The room went still. Daniel said, because you told me last night. After your mother left, I asked you what she did, and you told me. Eric said, Daniel, we have never had that conversation. Adam and Ben were staring at Eric now. Your mother is a what? Ben said. Eric said, Daniel, I have never told anyone in this group what my mother does for a living. I have never told you, so how do you know? Daniel could not answer. He sat there with his filthy legs sticking out of the sleeping bag and his head pounding, and he tried to find the bottom of what was happening to him, and he couldn't. Eric said, "Just wait, I'm going to call my mother. She'll come, she'll know what this is." She came. The four of them sat in the cabin, and Eric's mother arrived again, and this time she sent the other three outside and sat down in front of Daniel. She said, "Are you all right, son?" He said, "I don't understand what's happening. I saw what I saw. I know I saw it. I know your son told me you were a shaman. I'm not making it up." She nodded slowly. She said, "Daniel, you have a gift. You may not have known it before, but you do. You're sensitive. You're what we call open. People like you sometimes see things that overlap with reality, and sometimes you can't tell which is which. Last night, what you saw was real to you, but it wasn't real to anyone else. Do you understand?" "No," he said. "Ma'am, you came. You had the knife, the paper streamers. You came twice. Once in the night, once just now." "Daniel," her voice was very gentle and very firm, "if you keep insisting that what you saw is real, you are going to lose your mind. The mountain spirits got into you last night, and you ran. That's why your legs are like that. Your friends caught you. They saved you. The story your mind is telling you, that they were the ones possessed. That's the spirits trying to keep their hooks in you. You have to let it go. You have to trust me. I am a shaman. I do this for a living. If you don't listen to me, this thing is going to ride you until it kills you." What was he going to do? He was 20 years old. He was alone in a cabin with the only adult in the room, and she was telling him with complete authority that he was the crazy one. He didn't have anywhere to stand. He said, "Yes, ma'am." She told him to go home. Rest. Don't be alone too much. Come and see her tomorrow, with Eric, at her place in town. She had things she wanted to give him. They cleaned up the cabin. They drove back. Eric dropped him at his apartment. The next day, Daniel went with Eric to his mother's practice, a small house on a quiet street, with a sign out front in characters Daniel didn't really look at. Eric walked in like he owned the place, opened the fridge, helped himself to a soda. His mother sat Daniel down at a low table and talked to him for a long time. She said, "Daniel, you have an opening, a small opening. Spirits can get in. Most people are closed. You're not. For the next few weeks, you're going to feel strange. You may feel exhausted. You may feel feverish. You may see things at the edge of your vision. When that happens, ignore it. Don't pay attention to it. Don't dig into it. Live your life. Go to your job. Eat your meals. The worst thing you can do is feed it with your attention. Do you understand?" He said yes. She gave him a stack of paper charms, talismans, folded small. She told him to keep one in his wallet, one under his pillow, one in his bag. She said, "You're not the kind to be a real shaman. You don't have the full calling. What you have is an opening, and if you're not careful, lesser spirits, false ones, hungry ones, will move in. We don't want that. We want you to close the door, live your life, don't go looking." He took the charms and he went home. And she was right about one thing. He felt awful. It wasn't the flu. It wasn't a hangover. It wasn't anything he could name. His body felt drained, not tired from exercise, but emptied out, like somebody had pulled the plug on a tub and the water had gone down the drain. He couldn't get warm. He couldn't get hungry. He'd lie on his bed in the afternoon and just stare at the ceiling. he started thinking about giving up the apartment and going home to his mother. A few days into this, Adam called. "Daniel, why don't you ever pick up? Where have you been?" "I'm sick. I don't know what it is. I just feel terrible." "Come out. Let me buy you dinner. My treat." "I don't have an appetite." "Come out anyway. Sitting alone in that apartment is making it worse. Trust me." So Daniel went. They sat in a little grill place, and they cooked meat, and they drank beer, and they talked about nothing. By the end of it, Daniel did feel a little better. They paid, and they walked out into the street, and Daniel turned to say goodbye, and Adam was standing there with his mouth half open, like he had something to say and couldn't get it out. "Adam." "What?" "Nothing." "Adam, are you all right? Like, really? Are you all right?" "I'm fine. You keep asking me that. What's going on?" Adam looked up the street and looked down the street and looked at his shoes. "You weren't crazy," he said. Daniel stopped breathing. "What did you say?" "You weren't crazy. What you saw at the cabin, that was real. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That was real." Daniel grabbed him by the arm and pulled him over to a wall and made him stand there and talk. It came out in pieces. Adam was shaking the whole time. Adam said that morning, after Daniel had seen what he saw and run into the main room and woken Eric, what really happened was that the shaman did her ritual, and then Adam and Ben woke up on the kitchen floor not remembering anything. They were confused. They were scared. They could feel that something had happened to them. And Eric had sat them down in the main room while Daniel was still asleep, and Eric had pulled out 2 thick rolls of cash, about $1,000 each, and pushed them across the floor. "Listen to me," Eric had said. "Listen carefully. Daniel is going to wake up soon. If you want Daniel to live, you do exactly what I say. You go in there, and when he tells you what he saw, you tell him it was him. You tell him he was the one in the kitchen. You tell him he ran into the woods and you chased him. You tell him your eyes were never white. You tell him I never said our mother was a shaman. If you stick to that story, he lives. If you contradict me, he dies. He actually dies. That's the deal. Are we clear?" And they had taken the money, and they had done it. Daniel stood there leaning against the wall. "Why?" he said. "Why was Eric? What was—" "I don't know all of it yet," Adam said, "but there's more. My parents, my father goes to this monk sometimes. He's known him a long time. After all this happened, I told my parents about the money. I had to. It was sitting in my drawer and I couldn't sleep with it in the house. My dad took me to the monk. And fire. And the monk took one look at me when I walked through the door, and he said, 'What have you been doing? What has been touching you?' And I told him the whole story, and he said, if I don't undo what I helped do, I'm going to be punished for it. Me or my children. He said, you can't do that to a person. He said, I have to come and tell you the truth. I have to untie what I helped tie." Daniel was quiet. "What do I do?" he said. "What am I supposed to do?" "Come back with me. Stay at my house tonight. Tomorrow we'll go see the monk together. We'll figure it out." Daniel said okay. He went home with Adam. Adam's parents were waiting up. They were warm with him in a way that, looking back, he realized was guilt. They wanted to help him because helping him was the only way to keep their own son safe. But it was warmth. He took it. He lay down in Adam's room and he started to relax for the first time in days. His phone rang. Eric? He looked at Adam. Adam shook his head. Daniel picked up. "Where are you?" Eric said. "I'm at Adam's place." "Daniel, listen to me. I need you to come to my house. Right now. I don't care what time it is. I need to talk to you. It's about you. It's about your life." "Eric, it's the middle of the..." "Daniel, right now, get up and come over here." Across the room, Adam was making a slashing motion across his throat. "Hang up, hang up." Daniel said, "It's late. I'm staying here. We'll talk tomorrow." He hung up. The phone rang again immediately. He didn't answer. A text came through. "If you want to live, get away from Adam. Now." Daniel stared at the screen. In the middle of his chest, something went cold. Because now he didn't know. He didn't know. Adam had just told him a story that made everything make sense. The cabin, the money, the lies. But he also knew that Adam was a guy who, by his own admission, had taken $1,000 to gaslight him into thinking he was insane. And Eric was Eric, the friend he'd had the longest, the one whose family had been feeding him all year, the one whose mother had sat across from him with her hand on his and called him son. The phone rang again. "Eric." Daniel said to Adam, "Let me take this. 1 second." He picked up. "What?" "Daniel, you idiot. The whole thing at the cabin, the setup, it was Adam. Adam pulled you in there. My mother saved you. She's the reason you're still walking around. Get out of his house. Get out now." "Eric." "Get out." Daniel hung up. He looked at Adam. He didn't know which one was lying. He genuinely did not know. Both stories were complete. Both stories explained everything. And whichever one he believed wrong was going to be the one that killed him. He stood up. He said, "Adam, I'm sorry. I have to go." "Daniel, please, please don't go. Please don't go to Eric." "I'm not going to Eric. I'm going home, to my apartment. I need to be by myself. I need to think." "Daniel, don't follow me. I need to think." He walked out of Adam's house, and he started walking. Just walking. He didn't have anywhere to go. His phone rang. Adam. He didn't answer. It rang again. Eric. He didn't answer. He tried to call Ben, the third friend, the one who hadn't said a word to him about any of this, and Ben didn't pick up. Of course he didn't. It was the middle of the night. He walked, and he walked, and after maybe an hour of walking, he looked up and realized he was passing the intercity bus terminal. The first buses of the morning were just about to start running. He stood there looking at the terminal, and he thought, very clearly, "I want my mother." He bought a ticket on the first bus to his hometown. He turned off his phone. He got on the bus. He rode the hour back to the city he'd grown up in, and he got off, and he walked from the station to his mother's house, and he opened the door. His mother was at the kitchen table eating breakfast. She looked up. "Honey, what are you doing here?" He sat down across from her, and he tried to tell her, and what came out was just everything, all of it. The cabin, the white eyes, the shaman, the charms, the $1,000, the phone calls. His mother listened to all of it without interrupting, and then she stood up and put her hand on top of his head and said, "Get in the car." His mother is a serious Christian. She had never once tried to drag him to church, but she put him in her car and she drove him to her pastor, and she called the pastor on the way, and when they got there, the pastor was waiting for them. The pastor sat Daniel down. He prayed over him. He laid his hands on Daniel's head. He spoke in tongues. He kept his hands on Daniel for what felt like a very long time. And while the pastor's hands were on his head, Daniel felt something. He felt a cold pressure that had been sitting between his shoulder blades for days, a pressure he had honestly stopped noticing because it had become part of him. That pressure started to move. It moved up his spine, slowly, inch by inch. It reached the back of his neck. It reached the top of his head. And then it went into the pastor's hands and out. The pastor staggered back from him and turned to the side and spit several times hard, like he was trying to get something out of his mouth. Then he straightened up and he prayed some more, quieter this time. And when he was done, he sat down next to Daniel. He said, "Son, you went looking for help in some strange places this week." "Yes, sir." "You were going to a shaman." "I almost did." "Listen to me. I am not going to tell you what to believe, but I want you to think about one question. The shamans serve their gods. We serve ours. Do you think any god they serve is stronger than the one I serve? Do you think any spirit they bargain with can stand against him?" Daniel said no. "Then when you are afraid," the pastor said, "do not run to the shamans. Run to me. Run to your mother. Run to the one who is stronger than any of it." By the time Daniel walked out of the church, it was evening. He had been there all day. He felt different. The cold was gone from his back. He could breathe. He turned his phone back on, and within 10 seconds, Eric was calling. He answered. "Where are you?" Eric said. "Where have you been? Come over right now." "Eric, I'm fine. It's handled. I don't need anything anymore." "What do you mean it's handled? What do you mean handled? Daniel, where are you?" "I said it's handled. You don't need to worry about me. You take care of you. Do not call me again." He hung up. He called Ben. Ben picked up this time. He said, "Ben, I know about the night at the cabin. I know about the $1,000. I just need you to tell me, was Adam telling the truth?" There was a long pause on the other end, and then Ben said, very small, "Am I going to have to give the money back?" That was enough. Adam had been telling the truth. Daniel called Adam. He told him he had gone to a church, that something had lifted, that he felt clean. Adam started crying on the phone. He said he'd been up all day terrified that Daniel had gone to Eric's house and disappeared. And then Adam told him the last part, the part the monk had explained to Adam's father. This is the thing about shaman lineages. The calling is hereditary. It runs in families. When a shaman gets old, the spirits she serves don't just retire with her. They look for the next vessel, and the next vessel is usually her child. That's how it works. That's how it's worked for as long as anyone has been doing this. Eric's mother did not want her son to be a shaman. She loved her son. She did not want him to live the life she had lived. And so the monk explained, there is a way to redirect the calling. There is a way to transfer the lineage to somebody else, somebody outside the family, somebody who has the right kind of opening in them and who can be brought close enough at the right moment to take the inheritance instead. Daniel thought back. He thought back to orientation, that very first night, before he'd even started classes. He thought about how, when his parents had dropped him off, Eric's mother had also been there. Not just dropping Eric off, staying, sitting in the lobby, watching the freshmen come in. The other parents had all left within an hour. Eric's mother had stayed for the whole day. She had been shopping, she had been looking for somebody with the right kind of opening, and she had found Daniel, and she had spent the next 6 months, through her son, through the friend group she had basically engineered, through the apartment, regularly stocked with home-cooked food from her own kitchen, through the summer job she had arranged, through the trip to the valley with the strong energy, preparing him, getting him into position, lining him up so that when the moment came, the inheritance her son was supposed to receive would flow into Daniel instead. The night at the cabin was the moment. Adam and Ben had been incidental. They were drunk, they were young, they were just unlucky enough to fall into whatever current was running through that valley while the ritual was happening. Daniel was supposed to have been the one in the kitchen. Daniel was supposed to have been the one with the white eyes. The reason the gaslighting had to happen the next morning, the reason Eric had paid Adam and Ben $1,000 each to lie to him, was that the transfer wasn't complete. Daniel had broken out of it somehow, snapping his friends out of the trance with a bowl of water, refusing the role the mother had cast him in. So Eric and his mother had tried to finish the job another way, convince him he was the unstable one, convince him to come back to her, to take her charms, to depend on her, to keep the door open just a little longer until they could try again. And it had almost worked. The reason Daniel had felt so sick the week after the cabin wasn't that spirits were leaving him, it was that they were still trying to get in. The charms in his wallet weren't protecting him. They were holding the door open. The pastor's prayer was what closed it. Daniel cut Eric off. He cut all 3 of them off, not on purpose with Adam and Ben, but it just happened. Eric was the gravity that had held the group together, and when Eric went, the rest dissolved. Daniel withdrew from school for the 2nd semester. He served his time in the military. When he came back to finish his degree, he checked the rolls out of curiosity. Eric, Adam, and Ben had all been expelled, or withdrawn, or simply gone. Nobody could tell him exactly which. He never found out what happened to any of them. He never went back to that valley. He never spoke to a shaman again. He goes to church with his mother now. He has a family of his own. And the thing he says when he tells this story, which isn't often, the thing he says at the end is this. He says what really stays with him isn't the white eyes on his friends' faces, or the sound of the gongs, or even the cold thing leaving his spine in the pastor's office. What stays with him is a mother who loved her son so much that she was willing to take somebody else's son, somebody who trusted her, somebody who ate her food, somebody she called dear, and feed him to the thing she didn't want her own boy to inherit. He thinks about that. He's a father now. He thinks about it every time he drops his own kid off somewhere. He says it's easy to love your own child. Anybody can do that. The harder thing, the thing that separates a decent person from whatever Eric's mother was, is remembering that every other child you meet is somebody else's child, just as precious, just as irreplaceable. He says people like that exist, people who only see their own. And he says the scariest part of his story isn't the shaman, or the spirits, or the cabin in the valley. The scariest part is that she was somebody's mother,